Philippines in the 80s in David Berg's household. David Berg was leader of the Children of God cult. When my mom got pregnant with me, Berg decided that it would be a great idea to document a child's life from before their birth and sort of use me as an example of how to raise a child. He documented my mother's entire pregnancy, and actually the whole experience of my birth was written in a publications of the Children of God cult called Lifeline.
All right. Yeah, my main interest in this video is not really the Christian cult aspect of it, but the children of God or any of that. I have another point to make with this, but just to clear things up, the children of God is what's referred to as a Christian cult. And so, a Christian cult, you might ask, well, how in the world do you have a cult if they're Christian? Well, they're not Christians. A Christian cult is defined as a religious group who uses Christian symbolism and terminology and ideas and themes and such, but they use that just to wrap up their own non Christian, non biblical, heretical, apostate beliefs. And typically, when you're dealing with a Christian cult, when you ferret down far enough into their beliefs, even ones that seem like, normal, happy, healthy ones, like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, for instance, is a Christian cult. The Jehovah's Witnesses are a Christian cult. Now, those two Christian cults are a lot closer to Orthodox Christianity, like me. They're a lot closer than, say, the Children of God or even the Branch Davidians. David Koresh at the Branch Davidians out in Waco years and years ago, also a Christian cult. But the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, and even the Seventh day Adventist, the Christians who have church on Saturday, they're also technically a Christian cult. Now, I know that'll offend a lot of people, a lot of good people around here who think of themselves as good Christians who are Mormons, Church of Jesus Christ Latter day Saints, or Seventh day Adventists, or even Jehovah's Witnesses, and whatever, because they're a lot closer in their theology to Orthodox Christianity than, say, the Children of God or the Branch Davidians or the Jonestowns, Jim Jones and those types. But uh, within Christian theology, Orthodox Christian theology, ortho means correct and dox means belief. So orthodox is correct doctrine, correct belief. That's just the Greek word for it. That's not to be confused with the Orthodox Christians, like the Greek Orthodox Catholics and the Russian Orthodox Catholics and so on and so forth that are a part of the Eastern Catholic Church. It's the same word, Orthodox, but when I say Orthodox Christianity, I'm just talking about Christian churches that subscribe to basic tenets of Christianity or that are correct doctrines. Things like we believe in the virgin birth. We believe in the eternal nature of Jesus Christ. Always was, always is, always will be. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. So when you get into like oneness churches, like a lot of Pentecostal churches or oneness churches, T.D. Jakes, whatever preacher, that megachurch preacher, T.D. Jakes, he's oneness, so he is in fact not Orthodox. That is true. If you are of the oneness, you don't believe in the Trinity, you're not Orthodox. That's a whole other argument that I'm happy to have with anyone who'd like to have it. But a Christian cult is a religious group who takes non-Christian beliefs and they wrap it up in Christian terminology, Christian phrases, Christian ideas, but they are very much not Orthodox Christians. Reverend Sun Young Moon, who started the Moonies, I forget what the name of the church is, the Friends of God, or Family of God, or something like that. Reverend Sun Young Moon. We have a relatively large community of Moonies just south of us here from Grand Bay down in Viola Battery and Coden in that area. The Moonies also a Christian cult. So the Children of God were a Christian cult, but I'm just telling you what a Christian cult is, technically speaking, just so you kind of understand what's going on with this cult. But my point of making this video commentary on this lady's story is really not to get into the religious aspect of a Christian cult. But I will say that when you get into these Christian cults, whether it's the Moonies or the Mormons or anything like that, as you ferret down into their doctrinal beliefs, you will ultimately find that the end all goal of it had something to do with sex, sex with a lot of women, sex with minors, often, not always, but often sex with, it has something to do with sex. And that's because, I mean, when you read in the Old Testament where God and the prophets are referring to the prophets of Baal and Asherah and that sort of stuff. Well, those are fertility gods. Those were Canaanite fertility gods. And Baal was also a god of war, god of thunder, but it's a fertility god. So when you move away from Orthodox Christianity, which is Christ and Him crucified, it's about redeeming the lost back, reconciling them back to the Father, bringing them back into right relationship with the Father, not through some sexual act or anything like that or fertility ritual, but simply through coming and submitting oneself under the shed blood of Christ, that sort of stuff. When you move away from that and you move into some other means, then you're moving into the means of men, ultimately of Satan. And that's when you're going to get into these worships of fertility and sex and things of the flesh and that sort of stuff. But anyway, so you'll see that in this cult though. But in the meantime, let's give it a listen, and I'll probably break in a few times just because that's what I do. But otherwise, let's give it a listen. It's a heck of an interesting story of abuse, endurance, overcoming, and that sort of stuff.
I grew up walking around the house and there would be orgies going on. There would be women doing striptease videos around the house. There would be meetings where they would have inspiration and they would have children, 12, 13, 14 years old, and they would literally be dancing for the home and taking their clothes off, and adults would be cheering. So I was exposed to a lot of sexuality at a very, very early age. It was always terrifying to me because I knew at some point I would have to be doing the same things. And that's what happened to me when I was 3 years old. I was actually given to Berg by my mom to be married. He gave me a ring. We had a whole ceremony and everything. I had just turned 3 and I had gotten this dress with puffy sleeves and I had gotten a doll. I was just told to smile, do whatever grandpa tells me to do, and to just be there and like a good little cult kid and like, yay. I had no idea when Berg put me on his lap and he gave me a ring. I had no idea what was going on until he started explaining, like, this ring means you'll belong to me and you'll be mine forever. That was my marriage ceremony. When Berg would call for me, he wanted to be with me, and this was like cuddle time with grandpa, which was basically child abuse. I was exposed to a lot more sexual activity from the age of 3 and up, and then that's where a lot of the sexual abuse and the memories of my younger life began. Berg will just request from the adults, like, I would like to see the girls dance for me in a video. Or he would request something from one of the adult women. I would love for like this woman to do a strip tease for me. And they had a whole filming area that was in the basement of this house, down in this courtyard. They just grab you, bring you somewhere and say, okay, you're going to be in this video. And we were told to dance for the camera and dance for grandpa. You're in a basement, you're surrounded by darkness, there's bright lights on you, and you're told to dance. I just kind of froze up and I started crying, and what ended up happening is I got a punishment and I was beaten because I ruined the video for grandpa. Berg would actually watch the videos and be like, oh honey, you could use a little more, like you should grow your hair longer, or like, oh that color doesn't suit you, like, oh you should move your body a little more this way and this way. The women would have to sit there and take it and be like, praise the Lord. Yes. Us kids, it was very much rooted in the sexual abuse of it. So pull your pants down, expose your naked bottom to the home, whether it's 50 or 100 or 200 people. Now with adults, it was a lot more sinister. In particular with Berg, he was like, are you sorry? And they'd have to say, yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. Thank you for punishing me. Their they're gone. Cult love to traffic their children. Traveling with children was always done in the middle of the night so that nobody would know and could follow them and would know what was going on. When we moved from Philippines to Japan, I was woken up in the middle of the night. My stuff was already packed. We got into a car, we left and took a plane to Japan, and we ended up in Japan. I was told, like, you cannot tell anyone you lived with grandpa. You can't tell anyone you're married, dear. You can't tell anyone that's your mom, that's your sister. You're just Serena. That's all you are. We ended up going to a commune in Niterói, and we lived there for about 2 years because my mother was pregnant with my younger sister. And as soon as my younger sister was born, yet again, in the middle of the night, I was told, we have to move. This is how we were trafficked. Whoever was signing the papers suddenly became the legal guardian. So
I think it's worth pointing out that none of this could have happened. None of this trafficking, none of this sexual abuse of the women and children, none of this could have happened if these women and children were in intact nuclear families. I say none of it. It would have been very difficult to do it. The only way that could have happened is if the father of that family, the father of this child, the husband of this woman, if she had one, if he was actually a weak, feminine man who was very, very interested in fitting in with the group. You see, the reason that women like this are so easily led off into these cults like this is because it's very, very important to the female mind that she fit in, that she be one of the pretty girls, that she have friends, that she is accepted by the group as a whole. Whereas the masculine mind is typically, not always, I agree. There are many men out there who are just emotionally weak, just their emotional makeup, or they've been raised to hate their masculinity and to think that standing up and, punching someone in the face is sometimes necessary. They've been taught that that's not true. They've been taught things like there's never a reason for violence and that sort of stuff. That sort of thing. They've been feminized by the culture to believe that everything in them that's masculine is somehow another evil or harmful or, toxic. They use the word. So there are those men. But what I'm saying is that absent that exception, the nuclear family where the father is in the home, I'm not talking about stepfathers, nothing against stepfathers directly, but I'm not talking about stepfathers. And I'm not talking about, well, the child's grandfather, the child's uncle, the scout master or the youth pastor. Well, they can kind of fill in the gaps that are left by the absence of the father. It doesn't work like that. The father is the protector of the home. And in most of these type cults you come across that are, Christian cults, and they are sexually, driven like this, and they end up with the abuse of the women and the children, you will find absent husbands and fathers, or you will find men in the cult who've been feminized and subjugated to allow this to happen to their wives and their children, the mothers of their family. So, the mothers of their children. That's what you're going to find out. Absent fathers or weak, neutered, feminized men. You don't find these sorts of cults, these sorts of groups of people where women and children are sexually abused or abused in any way that also have strong, masculine, patriarchal husbands and fathers present. You don't find that. Husbands are important. Well, we get along better and we have a better relationship just living together than most married people I know. Doesn't matter. It's not the same as having a husband and a father. And the important thing about husband is a husband is a man, even if he's not a perfect man or he's not even a very good man. A husband is a man who has at least made a public proclamation that he takes on the responsibility to provide for and protect that wife. That boyfriend, maybe he's very genuine and sincere, but all he's doing is the same thing he was doing in middle school or high school when he had a girlfriend. He's not a husband. He hasn't moved into that office, so he hasn't formally committed to be the protector of that family at all. He's committed to be the protector so far. That's just the way it works. At any rate, let's see what else she has to say. It's a very, very interesting story.
You could pass kids off systematically to whoever needed to travel with them with all of these copies of power of attorneys that were previously notarized and signed by the parents, and then you would just need to sign it away to whatever adult was traveling with children at the time. And that's how Jeremy, Spencer, and Dora ended up taking care of me from then on out. After my mom had my younger sister, she never raised us again. We were separated. She became a top leader. I ended up seeing her only like once a year, sometimes once every other year. Berg was constantly telling the cult, Jesus is coming back. He's coming back in the clouds and he's going to whisk us all to heaven. We are the chosen ones. So if Jesus is coming back in, 10 years, what's the point of having an education? What's the point of going to school? Like, let's just get these kids out on the road. Let's just get these kids begging on the streets and singing on the streets because we need money. We have a bunch of kids. We need to win souls for Jesus. That was the whole thing. Like, we need to win as many souls for Jesus so we can get all the stars in our crown, so we can be whisked up into the sky for heaven and rewarded on high and live happily ever after in the sky. And every time those years passed and Jesus was not coming to take us up in the sky, he would say, oh, we're doing such a good job spreading Jesus's love that Jesus is giving us more time on this earth. A lot of times you were either told to take care of kids, watch kids younger than you, or work in the kitchen. I actually asked to work in the kitchen because I just wanted.
Just to point out this part about, Jesus is coming this year, and then when Jesus ended up not coming that year, that this guy Berg just came out with a new story. Well, he's given us more time on the earth because we're doing such good. I just want to point out how that plays to the feminine mind, the optimism of the feminine mind, the tendency of the feminine mind to make decisions based on things that they don't know rather than things that they do know. For instance, well, we don't know that what he's saying is not true. We don't know for a fact that it's not true. So therefore, we can't say it's not true. You see, that's a very, very common mode of thinking for a lot of women and feminized men, is they make serious life decisions not based on evidence to support the decision they're going to make, but rather on the lack of evidence that would negate the decision they're about to make. Well, we don't know if that's true or not, so we should act as if it's true. That's basically the mindset. So it's just really, really easy because of the way the feminine mind works. It's going to be looking for the optimum, the optimistic way, the good results. It's going to be looking for just a little shred of, but what if it really is good? And that's not going to be based in logic and evidence and such. And that is another thing that makes women so susceptible to being exploited by people like this guy, this Berg guy, because he can just change the story, and they're going to go along with it because it appeals to that sort of a fantasy, that sort of a myth, that's sort of a mindset.
People to leave me alone. I didn't want to work with screaming kids, and I especially didn't like that the adults were telling us kids to spank the other children because we got spanked, so now we had to spank the other kids, and that really made me uncomfortable. So I ended up being able to work in the kitchen. So yeah, every single thing that was done to us was systematically done to separate us and to keep us in the cult, to keep us reliant on the cult, to where we couldn't have any contact with the outside world. And that's also why they encouraged all the women to keep having babies, because as soon as you have children and you're in this cult, now you're stuck in the cult and you're reliant on the cult. You're reliant on people helping you. Women are 22, 23 years old with already 3 children, and you didn't have any support. You didn't have.
Just let me throw this out. There's nothing wrong with someone being 20, 22, 23, 24 years old and already having 4 children. I don't think that this particular lady intends to be anti-natalist, but the idea that 21, 22, 23, 24 years old is too young to have multiple children, that's actually an anti-natalist position. There's nothing wrong with a woman. 20 to 25 is probably the most fertile time for a woman to have children, definitely before her 26, 27 days. It's when her body is the healthiest and will usually carry the healthiest pregnancies. and deliver that child and recover from the pregnancy the quickest in that time period. So that part right there, she's just, the way she presents it as if that's some evidence of abuse, that you would have 20, 21, 23, 24-year-old women that would have 2, 3, 4 babies. There's actually nothing wrong with that, and that's the way that our ancestors did it for centuries, really up until like the mid 20th century even. So not very long ago, that was normal for women to do that. Deirdre had our first child when she was almost 20. Okay, so she was 19 years old when our oldest child was born, and she had 5 of them before she was 30. Nothing wrong with that. That's not abusive. That's actually the healthy way of doing it. And the West, well, not just the West, but the West primarily right now, is below replacement rates because we're having less than 2.1 children per couple. Okay, we're having less than 2.1 children per couple, and what that means is our civilization of the West, which is founded on human rights, it's founded on things like equal protection under the law and those sorts of things, is about to collapse and go away because people have been propagandized into caring more about their financial security and their materialistic gains and be more concerned about their own comfort than they are the survival of the culture. The Judeo-Christian West that has given us such a great life that we have is going to go away because we're not birthing enough babies to pass on our liberty-loving legacy to. Liberty-loving legacy. Now, I'm being poetic. Right? That's alliteration. Liberty-loving legacy. We're just not having enough babies. So nothing wrong with it. Have plenty of babies. Start young, ladies. Start young. The world is telling you to go to college, get your degree, or start your career and everything. But look around and ask yourself, how many of your peers are actually doing that versus postponing marriage and either taking birth control or going to the abortion clinics, or else poisoning their bodies with the birth control pills or the implants or those sorts of stuff. But how many of your peers, ladies, are actually getting these high-paying careers and stuff that you are being told by the culture to postpone marriage and children in favor of? You know, it's a trick. It's a trap. Don't fall for the trap. Get married early, have babies, have a bunch of them. Be like the little old lady who lived in a shoe and had so many children until her uterus fell out. That's Andrew Dice Clay from back in the 80s. Okay. Anyway, back to the show.
Have any money, and a lot of times you didn't even have your own passport. Berg had this idea of being a wild woman for Jesus. He wanted all the women to have long hair and all the girls to wear dresses and skirts and flowing tops. Many times adults would have movie nights in the cult, and many times they would encourage the women to take their tops off and to watch the movie topless. I was always very, very skinny. My boobs are tiny. I've had the same size boobs since I was 12 years old. They just have not grown. Because I was very thin and I had tiny boobs, I was teased and shamed and told that I looked like a boy and I wasn't pretty and I wasn't desirable to men. I was like, okay, if no boys like me and I'm skinny and I'm ugly, I might as well just look like a boy and be like a boy. So I just became a tomboy. If you did not fit into the good beauty standards, they would literally have a shelf. When you were going into your dining room, people would put plates on the 3-tiered shelf, and the bottom shelf was called mini, the middle shelf was normal, and the top shelf was maxi. So if you're normal, you just took food from the middle shelf, the normal shelf. If you were a mini like me, you would take food from the mini shelf and they would have more carbs in it, so usually like more rice. And on the other side, if you were already heavy set, you would take food from the maxi shelf, which was less food than all the other shelves. And then Berg had these disgusting rules where he would say, if you're going pee, you can only use 1 sheet of toilet paper, and if you're pooping, you can only have 2 sheets of toilet paper, and that's it. But then Berg was like a big germaphobe, like you had to wash your hands really well, and you had to shower every day, and you had to look clean, you had to look presentable, because all the women and all the girls always had to look good for the men, because that was our job, of course, you know, to look good for the men so that the men would want us, and if the men didn't want us, then, you know, you were absolutely useless. useless. The rules started changing in the late 80s because Berg was like, first of all, there's so much attention on him. The authorities were constantly after him. So he tried to do his.
Okay, here she's fixing to get us something very interesting. While she's telling this story, remember what I said a couple minutes ago, about why it is that women are so much more susceptible to being sucked into these sorts of stories and being held there for a long, 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 long time. Because women, for the most part, yes, there are exceptions, not all, not all, not all, not all, but they wear these rose-colored glasses. This is what the same reason that so many women have stories of a psycho ex-boyfriend or a psycho ex-husband who they knew was abusing them and mistreating them and lying to them and those sorts of things, but they hung in there to the bitter end often. It's because they always want to look for what's the best in it. And maybe they're going to come through, and I don't want to be someone else who doesn't believe them, and I still want to fit in with the group and that sort of stuff.
First rebrand. No adults can have sex with kids anymore. Jesus has told me, suddenly there's a new rule, like no more sex with adults. And he made this whole thing like the system didn't understand. He changed it. But of course, once you open the door to that sort of child abuse, it's not like it's going away because one day it's not allowed. After Berg died, that's when suddenly they were like, oh, well, Berg's dead, so there's no more secrets with him. So now that he's dead, you can say you knew Berg and that you're married here and you grew up with him. And I went from being like this secretive child to all of a sudden like going to another commune and everyone's like, oh, it's Mary Dear. Kids would come up and be like, can you sign this for me? And like, can you write me a note and say it's from Mary Dear? The cult really wanted me to stay as like a good example for all the other children. Little did they know I was like already planning my escape and just waiting to turn 18. I got the adults to drive me to the bus station. I took a bus up from Mexico City to Houston, and then that's when I decided to leave the cult. And I immediately got a job as a receptionist in a massage parlor and making friends and realizing life out here is like really not that bad. Little things that people take for granted every day were like crazy ideas for me, like I can eat ice cream and I can watch whatever movie I want, like crazy stuff. I went crazy watching movies and reading books, like as much books as I wanted. The initial thoughts were just like, oh, I was lied to my whole life. You can still have a beautiful life even though terrible things have happened to you. I don't choose to focus on the fact that my mom gave me to a pedophile at 3 years old and he was 68 and I married him. I don't wake up thinking of all the terrible things that have happened to me. I wake up so grateful that I speak 3 languages, that I've been to 42 countries, that I've lived in 10 countries long term, that I have an amazing worldview and I have so much more empathy and understanding for others in different situations and in different cultures because of the way that I grew up. And that's what I hope people can take away, and that's what I hope people will learn from their own healing. I was born in the...
That last part is the part that really made me want to do this video, is that this young lady went through this cult experience where she was given to an old man as his quote unquote wife at 3 years old. She lived in a house that was extremely sexually abusive, right down to the point that it was group sexual abuse. The videos, the humiliations, the being controlled. I mean, one piece of toilet paper if you urinated, and 2 pieces if you defecated, and all of this being pulled up from her surroundings and moved from country to country and trafficked to people, being separated from her mother, so she lacked the love and attention and support of a mother. The best I can tell by the story, absolutely no presence of a father in her life. I don't know, maybe the old man Berg was her father, but there's no mention of that in the video. Just a objectively horrible, abusive. If anyone on the planet would have a reason to be bitter and sour and scornful and hateful, I think this lady right here would be able to qualify to do that, but she's not. No, she talks about what a great life she has. She talks about how although she was mistreated and abused and exploited as a child, that didn't necessarily have to define the rest of her life. She talks about how thankful she is in the midst of all of that horror that she was able to live long term in 10 different countries, and she speaks like 10 different languages or whatever the numbers were, this, that, and the other. And so I see that. And then, like, I heard a podcast the other day about an issue that I've spoken on and posted in text a lot about and made videos about. It was this lady who had written a book, and she has a Facebook group called Doormat Mom No More. And what her book and her Facebook group, and this Facebook group has got 3,500 members, but that compared to some Facebook groups, that doesn't seem like a big, membership roll. Like I belong to Ford OBS pickup truck groups that I have 14, 15, 20,000 members in it. But think about it, it has 3,500 members. So that's 3,500 parents who have been affected by this zeitgeist of the culture amongst young millennials especially, and Gen Zers and younger, who grow up in relatively decent homes. This lady that founded the group and wrote the book and was on this podcast, she was actually very affluent. And so her children grew up in a very affluent home. But then one or more of the children will come of age, and I personally think it has a lot to do with the influence of social media. But they will suddenly decide that their parents were just unconscionable, you know. And it's like this lady explained on the podcast, and I'll be the first to admit, no parents are perfect. You're not going to find a parent. If you find a parent who believes they're perfect and their children agree that they're perfect, you're probably dealing with something like what was going on in this video right here. But as far as a normal, everybody makes mistakes because we're figuring it out as we go along. Now, up until like my generation and the generations before us moved into adulthood, and we learned what life was really like firsthand. And then we would look back at mom and dad and we would say, well, you know what, mom and dad were learning as they went along. You know what, mom and dad was figuring it out too. You know what, mom and dad didn't have a crystal ball to see the future, but they were truly making the best decisions that they could make based on the information they had at hand. And although maybe they weren't the best decisions and they weren't the best reactions to situations, it was done out of love, and they were making the best decision, doing the best they could as they went along. And then there's this thing that comes in with most everyone up until the young millennials, maybe some of the old ones too. But this thing comes in where there is understanding and grace and love that's extended. And sometimes that'll go so far as for the young person, the child, whether they're an adult or whatever, but the child, to actually say, you know what, looking back on the way I was behaving back then, I'm surprised that mom and dad kept me. I say that sort of tongue in cheek, of course, but that used to be the normal maturity span, because everyone thinks they know what life's all about until they become an adult on their own. At any rate, for some reason, it seems like with the advent of the young millennials and zillennials and Gen Alpha and whatever else terms they want to come up with, I think it's because of the influence of social media. There's this thing come in where these children, and they're almost without fail, come from good, solid, usually Christian homes, usually at least solid middle class homes or higher on the economic scale, where these children often have not had to worry about their light bill being cut off. They haven't had to worry about going without a meal. They haven't had to worry about the kind of abuse that this lady endured. I mean, basically imperfect, but otherwise good, healthy, functioning homes. And they'll get to a certain age and they will turn around and shun their parents. They will completely ostracize their parents based on, well, they said things that hurt my feelings, or they didn't treat me as good as I thought I deserved to be treated, or they didn't do this right or that right or the other thing right. But those things they didn't do right, if you can get a detail or a description of what those things were, it will be things that are relatively minor on the great scale and scheme of life on that level. It will be something that to the child will seem so monumental, but on the great scheme of things will be really just minor, little issues, personality conflicts, and that sort of thing. So it's amazing to me that this young lady here, which she's not a young lady anymore, she looks like she's about my age or close to it. She grew up in the 80s. But for children like this, and often for children who grew up in economically uh, um, depressed situations or homes where there was other things of dysfunction like physical abuse or addiction, alcoholism, and stuff, often for some reason those children will be extremely loyal to their parents. And it's really wild because some of those parents, I know parents like that. And some of those parents, if anybody deserves to be culled by their kids, it'll be some of those people. Their kids, you couldn't drag them away, and you better not say anything insulting or critical about their abusive parent or their neglectful parent or whatever the case may be, because these kids will be ready to fight you to defend their parent, which was often by most any metric be what would be fair to call a bad parent. But you get into middle class and up financially, good, stable, intact homes, parents who got married and they had their children and they're still married 20, 30, 40 years later, and they provided a stable, as functioning of a home as possible to their children. And there's this zeitgeist, this trend going that is so big that even, like I said, this other lady founded a Facebook group and has written a book called Doormat Mom No More. And those 3,500 members she has, like I was about to say a minute ago, you may say, well, that's not really a big membership. That's 3,500 parents who have had their children do that to them. Now, if you think about that, that's 3,500 families. That's a lot of people. And I mean, I know several families personally myself, you know, and I didn't live in their homes with them, but I'm talking about personally that I know in my real life in the local world around me who raised their children in what you would call very, very good homes and have their children grow up and just decide to just walk out the door, cut their parents off. A common a feature of when that sort of thing is happening is that the child who claims to have been so mistreated and abused and disrespected or whatever will absolutely refuse to sit down and have a conversation about it, to go to therapy, any kind of counseling or anything with the parent to try to maintain the relationship, repair the relationship, work through it, and move forward. Nope, they're not interested in that at all. And usually by the time the parent even finds out that there's an issue, the decision's made, the parent is cut off, shunned, ostracized from the child's life, and that's that. And the child will not be willing to have any conversation, go into therapy, any sort of a disinterested third party to help counsel the parents and the child to try to reconcile and work through it. Nope. The parents will be treated as if they were those parents whose children you couldn't drag them away from that would deserve to be deserted. You know, the ones who raise their children in addiction and violence and, like this lady right here, sexual abuse and all of that sort of stuff. You see, those parents, their kids, you couldn't drag them away. But the kids who were raised in a functioning, healthy home, for some reason, there's this trend that there's nothing positive. Because the home was not perfect, then that means that there's nothing in the home that was good or healthy or memorable or valuable at all. And for the life of me, I just can't figure out why that is. But thank goodness that this lady right here is not responding to her abuse in such a way. And that's all I have to say, and I'm Dane.